point that I'm trying to make is that what it would take for the guilt to make a change is it has to override this other thing in me. I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
Hello and welcome to the Stoner Story Witch podcast. This is Kristyn. Thank you for tuning in today. I have to say that this podcast episode feels very disoriented, very disorganized, very on brand with the theme of disorganized attachment in Severance, which is the era that I am deeply exploring. I want to say that today, right now, as I am finishing up editing this podcast and recording my intro and outro, it is November 6th. It is the day after the election in the United States. And we found out today that Donald Trump is going to get another term. And yeah, just locating myself, I am a pretty privileged, well-resourced white woman. I currently no longer live in the United States. And while I have a lot I can say about my personal thoughts and feelings, I really do want to amplify a voice that I saw in my Facebook feed, of all places, earlier today. It's a post that was being rapidly reshared by Venice Williams. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I will link to it in the show notes, of course. But Venice writes, "You are awakening to the same country you fell asleep to, the very same country. Pull yourself together. And when you see me, do not ask me, what do we do now? How do we get through the next 4 years? Some of my ancestors dealt with at least 400 years of this under worse conditions. Continue to do the good work. Continue to build bridges, not walls. Continue to lead with compassion. Continue the demanding work of liberation for all. Continue to dismantle broken systems, large and small. Continue to set the best example for the children. Continue to be a vessel of nourishing joy. Continue right where you are, right where you live into your days. Do so in the name of the Creator who expects nothing less from each of us. And if you are not continuing all of the above, in community, partnership, collaboration, what is it you have been doing? What is it you are waiting for?" And that, reading that this morning really reminded me that today is really not any different than any other day. There's no surprise here that fascism is looming and that we are at this precipice of collapse, and Pluto is entering into Aquarius, which is a callback to the American and French revolutions. Like, there's so much out there about like that we are living in such a absurd time. And all we can do is reach towards the world that we want to co-create. Work towards what it is that we want, while certainly fighting against that which we don't. Today's episode is me trying out something new, very new for me. And it's this concept of a reality podcast. Because I've been thinking a lot lately about reality TV. Reality TV is a big part of the shared rhythm that I have with some of my friends. Most recently, it is Love Island and The Boyfriend and Queer Ultimatum. And in high school, I really loved The Mole. ABC's version was far superior to the Netflix reboots, or maybe I'm a different person now. There's a lot to unpack, but one thing is for sure. Most reality TV really is about activating the abandonment wounds and attachment injuries of the contestants so that we as the audience can project and transfer our own material onto those people. It's most important to note that it is really up to the producers how it's edited all together to tell a certain story. We get to see realness in the emotions and activations of the contestants, but the contestants themselves don't have agency in how their emotions get edited. They may not even really see that the whole point is just to get them dysregulated, isolated, and activated. And so I've been sitting with what it would look like to offer my activations, the grittiness of my life, the reality moments of my life, as a part of my larger story of reaching towards secure attachment in my most intimate relationships, where I'll walk into tough conversations and big feelings while we maintain our agency in how those conversations and feelings are shared out. So what I'm offering in today's episode is a conversation between my partner, Kevin, and I. The context that I need to provide, I think, is that I've been studying secure attachment for the last 3 to 4 years. And within the last year or two specifically, I have really been yearning for it. And one thing that I have learned, but it has really leapt off the page for me this last year, was how as we work towards building secure attachment, the relational field actually becomes more disorganized. So my marriage lately has actually been a paradox, and it feels very confusing. There's this kind of incoherent field of what I would label disorganization. Some days I feel really deeply connected and in love with my partner, and other days I feel disgusted, enraged, and hurt that I even fantasize about starting a women and children only commune. Deep down, I know that at the root of my marital discord is a difference in how my husband and I were conditioned into our gender stereotypes in a very cis, hetero, patriarchal society. I'm enraged at the things that he doesn't see, and I find it infuriating that I have had to create such a soft container for him before I can show him what I see, because any system of oppression conditions those in up power to become activated if someone from down power is helping them to see what they have been conditioned not to. And I just want to put a pause here that in Hadestown, there is a whole song where Persephone is pleading with Hades to get him to hear Orpheus's song, the song of liberation, the story of their love, a reminder of the honorable harvest and all the things that the song represents. And I just think of how that has played out so much in my life, that it's been Black and Indigenous women that have had to help me see things that I've been conditioned to not see. And how then when I'm in a down power position, like in my marriage, I am now then put in that same position. And the question for me is, can I offer my husband the same compassion that these Black and Indigenous women of color have consistently demonstrated for me? It's my own story as an oppressed oppressor, in the words of Rachel Ricketts. In my racial and social justice work, I've begun to see how I have been conditioned to go into a fear response when lovingly offered opportunities to have my eyes opened. I know much of my work is to reckon with what it looks like to forgive myself of my privileges in an unequal and harm-filled world, and instead utilize my privileges as a tool to create the change we need for a more liberated future. And so I believe that by practicing loving my husband despite his positionality in the patriarchy, I can open up to more self-love and self-compassion for my positionality as a white woman with access to hoarded resources. just like Helly will ultimately have to integrate, I hope, in season 2. And yet, the more I offer myself the compassion and love I need, the more I cannot stand the old paradigms and tired stories in my marriage. I cannot practice taking on new shapes if I only ever repeat old patterns. And I also just want to say that with offering out this podcast as a reality podcast of a sort, that I am inherently opening up my disorganized field to the collective. And the way mirror neurons work is that if you are listening to this podcast, you may find yourself getting into some disorganized state. If you hear me talk about my trauma response, let's say, it may evoke that in you. And so I'm sitting with the curiosity of what does it look like to be able to talk about that these are feelings that we have and work through them with, and also making sure to take good care of myself as the creator and anybody who happens to be listening to this. And so I'm going to do my best. Ultimately, I am realizing that I am more committed to the fall of the patriarchy than to the success of my marriage. And that if by staying married, I have to continue to take on old forms of myself, I want out of that marriage. And that ultimately would be my success. I don't actually believe that my marriage is over, or at least I have faith that my partner and I both have a desire to transform into congruent shapes. We are co-parents, and regardless of the state of our romantic and otherwise partnered forms in our relationship, raising our kids to be liberated and for a liberated future is a goal that we share. And that is huge. And I am proud of that. The context is that on the full moon in Aries, we engaged in a ritual of the marriage moon, which I will see if I can find some links and I can put in the show notes. But it is a practice that we learned from Carmen Spaniola and Ruben Anderson. However, when you do a big ritual, a lot of shit can get kicked up. And so today's episode is Discord mode and disorganized attachment and the Mediocre Sitcom Dad. So feel free to check the show notes for timestamps. But I want to just say that today is a very severance light episode. It's a very heavy personal episode. And I'll give a little bit of an overview of kind of what it's going to look like, just so that you can really consent to whether or not you want to listen to this. And if you want to skip ahead past my content warnings and explanations, feel free. Part 1 is pretty raw, and it's just me talking. Part 2 is I'm continuing to talk. It's the same day as part 1, it's just a couple hours later. Kevin joins the conversation a little bit. And then part 3 is later, and it is a lot more of a conversation, a lot more regulated between Kevin and myself. And it really is less of us having a kind of a live event between us, and more that we are discussing from a little bit more distance a conversation that we had since we recorded part 2. I hope that makes sense. I do loosely relate to severance, of course, a time or two. Certainly I'm going to talk about sourdough. So in part 1, I discuss a little bit of the ritual of the marriage moon. What I will say about the ritual of the marriage moon is just that it is a ritual container to practice asking for what it is that you need from your partner and trusting that they are going to hold it well. And likewise, they give you their needs and you hold it in your care. I talk about a small request that I have of Kevin that feels really huge. So the first part is really pretty slow. It's me just processing just how upset I am about a rupture that happened in Kevin and my marriage, that it is a long-standing request that I have made of him, that when he doesn't do it, activates this big trauma response in me. And it's becoming more and more common. And so it really is me sitting in my frustration, my overwhelm, my rage around that. I will be interrupting periodically to just make sure that you are able to show up in the way that you need to be in your day-to-day without being hopefully too dysregulated by anything that I am presenting here. A little bit about my past with trauma. I don't go into any huge detail, but I do talk about what it is to be activated into a trauma response. Again, not in great detail, but if that is an experience that you don't necessarily want to invoke, I invite you to skip this episode, skip that part. So I will be interrupting periodically through what I think could be some tough times to listen to just remind you, if you are listening, to be taking care of yourself. And what that might look like is literally just reminding your body that you have arms, you have legs, you have hands, you have feet. You can just literally kind of squeeze your hands or shuffle your feet. You can wiggle on your bottom if you're sitting, or kind of pivot your weight if you're standing. You can just look side to side, up and down, just kind of orient the muscles around your neck a little bit. You may just look at some object in the room or outside that just feels kind, warm, friendly, pleasing to you in some way. And you may even just like take a big breath and like let out a sigh. And you can always stop, and the pause button is your friend. Kevin and I, we did a little ritual of the marriage moon, which is a practice that we learned from Carmen Spagnola, friend of the podcast. And it is a way of just monthly ritualizing, asking for what we need, which is a really profound practice for me to reflect on what am I needing in this moment and what does it look like for me to actually ask. And then it is trusting that what it is that I'm asking for will be held in the care of my partner. And oh boy, lots of, I just want to say that I think inviting in severance, inviting in this ritual practice, it feels like a lot in a really juicy way. And I will just name that in this moment, I'm feeling a lot of heat and constriction in my chest. I think I would identify it as rage. I will contextualize that a rupture has happened within my marriage that we are here to talk about. And all morning, I've been hearing this DiFranco song in my head. When I think of stories and songs as resourcing me for collective liberation, I'm just like, okay, there is a part of me that listened to DiFranco a shit ton. And it was when I was a teenager. And I think it's similar to, maybe I'm just going to put a pin in the analysis of it. But it feels to me like it is an invitation from a past self, a resourcing from my past self that put this song in my subconscious. And the refrain from the song is called I'm No Heroine. I can link to it in the show notes. But DiFranco sings, I just write about what I should have done and sing what I wish I could say. And I hope somewhere some woman hears my music and it helps her through her day. And just saying that, I feel a wave of sadness. I feel a wave of, maybe it's not even sadness, but just like a deep yearning for what for why I'm here right now on this microphone. Because in this particular moment in my marriage, I feel very without hope. I'm noticing it's hard for me to even look at my partner right now. He's here, he's 6 feet away from me, he's holding a microphone, he's listening. And a part of me feels grateful. I feel I have to name that before I can just tend to the much larger parts of me that are so hurt. That since before we were married, there has been one request that I have made. And I'm not even going to say what the request is, because to me I'm not inviting in people's judgments of what is a worthy request. I recognize I'm a woman trying to be my authentic self on a public podcast. And I do not consent to the judgment of what that thing is. But what I will say is this request is small, and I know in no uncertain terms, and I've communicated in no uncertain terms to my partner, that I get absolutely flooded in my trauma response. That I am a 12-year-old who is navigating all the grief and fear and loss and confusion and rage at losing a parent. This is not a small request. And I have made it so many times. And it is such a sacred request that I didn't even include it in my list of requests in the ritual of the marriage moon last week. I had a smaller number naming that, like, I want to just name that this is a request that I hold, but I'm not even going to write it down because, like, if there was ever a non-negotiable, it would be that. And not even a week out, it happens again. Here's the funny thing, though. It happened in my season of severance. I've called it in. I feel such a loving tenderness to the rage that I feel in that moment. I feel so sure that where I am and where I want to be is not the same place. And it feels so much futility and hopelessness that anything is going to change. And I don't know what to do or where to go from here. I don't even really want to have this conversation. But then I just think, what would it take for me to say yes? And it's that I'm not doing this for me anymore. My intention with this episode is that some woman hears my music and it helps her through her day. Because I know this is such a familiar song. Or, like, I would say every single woman I know in a cis-het relationship can fucking relate to what I am talking about. Hi everyone listening to this. This is Editing Kristyn. I just want to take a moment. That was about a minute of me being pretty raw. How are you doing? Do you want to keep listening? Do you have capacity in this moment to listen? Can you feel your feet, feel your seat, maybe bring on your arms, your legs, maybe it's just squeezing the palms of your hands. Maybe just looking side to side. Everything's okay. And I recognize that I'm speaking of some pretty big things that could be bringing up a lot for you, especially if you've experienced any sort of trauma, or if you know what it's like to be in a relationship with someone who continues to not see you the way that you want to be seen, and you start feeling tired of asking for it. I see you. I want you to take really good care of those parts of you and really consider whether you want to keep listening. And you can always just take breaks and come back. Kevin wrote on his list for the ritual of the marriage moon that he wants my authenticity more than he wants my protection. And that is what I want. I want to be authentic more than I want to be creating a safe space for him to be able to endure the expressions of myself I allow to peek through. And I think about Helly. Think about Helly in Severance, who is so clearly in an insecure attachment with her family of origin, with her father, to the point that she severs herself. But that somehow in that process, she's able to tap into her own inner fuck no. Like, this fucking ridiculous. I do not consent. But she's capable of doing in the final episode, when her innie comes out. That is what I want. To be the authentic self without fearing for my safety, dignity, and belonging. I just want to say that, like, I don't think in this moment I'm ready to touch back into
your emotional landscape. I know the why and all the very good reasons that he has for why the rupture happened last night. And like, this conversation to me isn't about that. How can my rage from the reenactment of this experience resource me for the next thing? If this rage were a messenger, what's it inviting me to sit with? And I mean, if nothing else, feels a little more possible post-rupture than it did pre-rupture, to just even imagine a world where it's possible for me to not be hemorrhaging energy trying to attune to my partner's inner emotional landscape in a way that he's never been conditioned to do for me. Fucking do not consent to this.
Hey everyone, this is just another break. This is some intense stuff that's going on, so just notice. How are you doing? Do you need a break? Do you want to discharge some energy in some way? Look about the room, walk around, push against a wall. You are in choice to whether you want to keep listening. I invite you to listen. I invite you to take a break.
When we sat down, I felt a heaviness in my chest. It feels a little bit lighter. I feel like I can take a deeper breath. Orienting muscles around my neck are a little looser. A little more vitality to be able to look about the room. I don't have interest or capacity in looking at Kevin right now. I'm going to just hold that with compassion. We're centering my experience because this is my podcast. And I guess what's coming to is that, I guess a little process update is I emailed my teachers yesterday that I'm inviting to have come on the podcast to talk, kind of go into a headier space. One of the questions that came up was, so we'll stay tuned to listen to the answers, but the value of having like a top-down versus bottom-up approach to healing, or I guess we would say like a reintegration, if we're using severance terms. And I recognize that as the type of person that makes a podcast, the top-down, very intellectual teaching space is a space that I'm really comfortable in. But my question is around the values and the drawbacks of that with a bottom-up approach, letting the body actually inform the brain. And it feels interesting that question just came up to me yesterday, and then I'm sitting here recording what I feel to be a very bottom-up episode. And another question that I had that came out that I really want to explore is, we see in Severance the difficulty that Petey has in reintegrating. We know that there is this black woman that I believe is significant in the casting choice, who was the one that did the reintegration procedure, and she tells Mark that if Petey had followed the protocol, he wouldn't have died. If he had done what she had told him, he would be okay. And I feel so much of what this last week has felt like has been those really confusing, disorganized moments that Petey has, where he can't quite make sense of where he is, when he is, who he's talking to, what he can trust. So we don't get to see in the show what the protocol was for Petey. What was the recommendation for his reintegration? And I'm asking my teachers, what would those practices be as we're trying to reintegrate, as we're trying to build attachment? The opposite of severance is attachment. I asked that question yesterday, and I'm finding myself making the space for this conversation within 24 hours. And I'm feeling a curiosity if maybe this is part of it. Feeling a curiosity if maybe by asking the question, I can just believe that my body will give me the answer. And that maybe I don't have to have hope that things are going to change, but just do the next thing that feels right. Take that next step towards what it is that I'm reaching towards, the world that I care about. I think before I want to hear from Kevin, I want to go for a walk by myself. I'll do that.
All right. Then the second part is recorded 2 hours later. This is the first part where we actually hear Kevin open up the opportunity for him to speak. He talks about the impulse to want to be absolved from this sense of culpability in what it is to hold space for my pain. We talk about the usefulness of guilt versus shame, the difference in me wanting consistency versus demanding perfection. And we really seem to get at that there is a difference between the capital R request of not activating my trauma response that we discussed in part 1, and the small r requests that are related to some of the things that I ask for in the ritual of the marriage moon. Part 2, we also then talk about how Kevin and I each end up responding to our ritual of the marriage moon lists very differently, how our fear actually kind of manifests opposite reactions. And at the very end of part 2, I am inviting in what I think I'm going to affectionately call the archetype of the mediocre sitcom dad. Welcome back. It has been about 2 hours since we recorded that last bit. I had lunch and also went for a hike. Yeah, a little more settled maybe than the last time we were sitting in front of the microphones. Before I left on my hike, I said to you off when we were not recording that what would feel good for me would be for you to sort of fill in the prompt. It makes sense to me that you would feel like you need to protect me. Or like, it makes sense to me that you feel this way because patriarchy conditions me
in these ways. And it's interesting because as we're sitting here to record, I'm sitting in the question of, I have the intention that I want this podcast, this particular container of us sitting here, and I'm even noticing I'm able to look at you. I'll just reflect on that. That's a little bit of just a change.
I felt like an internal like confetti popper going when you said that.
I don't know what it's like to actually center my emotional experience in a conversation with a man. So sitting down to have the intention of like wanting to name my experience, center my experience, and also make space for you to talk. I don't know what that will look like. And I said also that I'm feeling a hesitancy towards receiving contact nutrition from you. Like I'm not actually looking for like a really heartfelt apology or anything. The kind eyes, the vocal prosody, like I don't even like a kind hand on my shoulder. Like I get that that's a hard thing maybe to hear. And when I'm like, I am not able to receive it. So I don't want you giving me something that I like just literally can't take in. So that's all I have to say, but I do want to make space for you to respond. I want to make space for you to respond.
This feels very delicate to me. It feels like I'm walking on thin ice. It feels like I'm walking through
What are the sensations in your body?
Tight chest, increased heart rate. Feels like I'm walking through a minefield, and I'm trying to be very careful to do it the right way, the way that you're asking me to. I hear what you're saying is you want this conversation to be centered on your emotional experience.
Yeah, and I don't even really know what that means. What that would even look like.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of the notes I wrote down while I was contemplating while you were walking. Just that, like, you telling me what you want feels good, feels comforting, grounding in the knowing of, like, you saying, this would feel good for me. Whatever that comes after that is, like, there's a part of it that's, like, sort of irrelevant because I feel grateful to that we are at the stage that we are at where you can say that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying thank you. I feel like I have like 10 prefaces. That was one preface.
Okay. That you're thanking me
For telling me what you need, telling me what would feel good.
Oh, okay.
For you being able to know what would feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Advocating for it. I like it. What's happening?
Yeah, I feel a tightness in my stomach. Say that you like it. My body really has trouble trusting that that's true. So, okay. It's not like a lingering. It was just if I like then now orient to my abdomen, it was fleeting. It just kind of like right when you were like, I like it. I was like, no, you don't. Okay.
Yeah, and I think to the whole what you're asking for this conversation, I have one thing that our therapist has said in my head, which is, our needs matter equally.
Mm-hmm.
She's often said that. but I'm not. I can hold that in my mind and also like just be like, right now we can focus on Kristyn.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that my needs don't matter, or my feelings don't matter, but you can just like take turns. That's what we tell our kids.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
I wrote down some notes on 2 prompts that it makes sense that you would feel the urge to protect me from big feelings, protect me from potentially triggering sentiments. And then I also collected some thoughts on just the prompt of like, it makes so much sense that you would feel angry at this rupture because XYZ. Right. Is there one of those that would feel better for me to start with?
Yeah, why it would make sense for me to feel like I need to protect you.
It does make a lot of sense that you would feel the urge to protect me because I used to have a very hard time with feelings. Like going back to the beginning of our relationship, I was averse to even having any conversation that was even adjacent to the topic of emotions and feelings. I had an embodied response to talking about emotions that was, I would feel nauseous. And so, and I was conditioned to avoid big feelings. I was taught when I was a kid that if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And to stuff feelings away. And so, you know, in our past, I have responded poorly to big feelings, you know, because of our society, because of patriarchy, because of gender conditioning. I have very limited practice with that. And it would make sense that you feel the need to protect me from things that you're worried might trigger me or whatever, because I often just get defensive, and that's also patriarchy. That I just my immediate reaction is just defend, explain.
Right.
And recently in the work that we've been doing, you know, we've uncovered that sometimes you can be angry and it's not because I did anything wrong. And we have to name that, because otherwise I just go into like defensive spiral and we can't actually be with your emotional experience. And what's interesting about this time is I know I did something wrong. Like and so it feels like a slightly different can of worms because of that.
Yeah. I just want to say it every time you say the word, like, I did something wrong, or I know I didn't do something wrong. Like, why does culpability come into the equation at all when someone's in pain?
like, why are you more able to be present to my experience because you can now be like, oh, I see that I have done something wrong, versus other times that I've been hurting and you've been like, well, I don't actually think I did anything wrong. So I don't know what my question there is, but I just want to say that I notice like the clamping down in my throat, and a tightness in my midline when anytime you say like, I know I didn't do something wrong, or I know I did something wrong, like because it's just like, I don't know, like it's just that it's like I'm just really I'm just kind of like, what does doing it anything wrong have to do with any of this?
I think I see your point that like the pain is pain, the hurt is hurt, the grief is grief, and like, can we just tend to that regardless of what caused it?
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Because it's like, maybe tell me if this metaphor is fair or not, but if God, this is terrible, but like, if a loved one accidentally died versus if a loved one got murdered, it's like either way your loved one is gone and you're just hurting. And so why does it matter if it was intentional or accidental?
Yeah, like that there's still grief.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you wouldn't be comforting somebody whose loved one died accidentally being like, well, at least they weren't murdered. At least nobody's responsible. Yeah. Or like, what? Like, it doesn't. Now, certainly there could be an amplified grief, an amplified violation. Certainly, if there's culpability to a loss of life. But I guess, yeah, do you see how that's like a much narrower window of like acceptable, like that there's so much pain to be processing in just the loss of of that person, and that like to only ever want to like make space for that sliver of fault is just like, what is that? Like fault just like it just doesn't compute. Like, I mean, it does. Like, yeah, I intellectually understand what you're saying, but I think
it does. It feels worse for me. It feels like a sharper guilt, heaviness, when I can clearly see that something that I have done or haven't done has brought up rage and anger and whatever for you.
And is that guilt a good thing?
Right. And is
there like a resourcing thing? I guess I shouldn't be like judging, but like if you're like,
because guilt and shame guilt can sometimes be useful and sometimes not.
Right. And I guess in my experience of your discussion around quote unquote doing something wrong, I've seen you several times tell me that you are experiencing guilt for your lack of tending to the request that led to the rupture we had yesterday. What would it take for that guilt to actually result in a discernible change? Because to me, the usefulness of guilt, the usefulness of culpability is, I now see that I have like an ability to respond differently. I have a responsibility to do the right thing, which is the thing that I didn't do, or the thing that I did but shouldn't have done, or like.
I know it's. I do think that's a fair question. And it's like, I kind of have a looking back and a looking ahead way that my mind is answering that. Because in the past, when I felt that guilt, it feels like it's woken me up for an amount of time. You know, I feel more awake. The thing that when I don't do it causes you a lot of pain, I'm reminded of how important that is. And then I go for a streak where I do it, and then I have a lapse. And so it's really like a question of what would it take for that guilt to prevent any future lapses. And like one thing I was thinking about while you're hiking is like, why is it like you've brought up a good I thought a useful way of like but one of the things we talked about in the ritual of the marriage moon, where you made requests of me and I made requests of you, and then the idea is that we trust the other person, that they're holding it in their care and they're prioritizing those things. And if that person doesn't do those things, it's not because they don't care, it's because they can't. They don't have the capacity or ability to do it at this time. And one of the things that you brought up in that ritual was the need for consistency, the need for consistent care that looks like this in specific ways. And in that conversation, I brought up that like the consistency felt scary to me because it felt close to perfection, and that if I messed up once, that like I was going to fail at the consistency need. And then you said, at some point you said like, well, we remember to brush our kids' teeth every day, or like we feed ourselves every day. So why should having a 3-minute head massage be any different than doing a 3-minute toothbrush? You know, it's just like, you want that to be like part of our day, like, right? And so I was thinking about that while you were hiking just now. Like, why can't, like, it's not for any lack of understand. Like you've told me multiple times, like that this thing is important, and when it doesn't happen, you get flooded. And it's like, I do it a lot. I do it a lot, but I didn't do it last night. And why can't I have it be like a toothbrushing thing? And so, I promise you, I'm not defending myself here. I'm trying to answer that question of what would it take for the guilt to make a change. And it's that it has to override this other thing in me. The point that I'm trying to make is that what it would take for the guilt to make a change is it has to override this other thing in me. I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
So, okay, I hear you, and I'm not actually interested in like, I just want to say I've given up hope that it's going to change. It was a rhetorical, I don't know.
I see.
So I have released attachment to that anything about this is going to change, that this is just a thing that like, and I've said to you before, it's like so many things, so like everything on my ritual of the marriage moon list is like literally if you did it 50% of the time, like the consistent care pieces. I was actually talking about this, I'm glad we're recording because I've been meaning to say, I chatted with my best friend Jamie. Has been on the pod, will be on the pod, just kind of depends on when this all plays. But I was telling her about this consistent care piece and how you have material over, I don't want to be like not enough, right? Like I don't like, when I hear the word consistent, that feels like perfection, and like that it seems like maybe there's a physiological recoil to that word consistency, to the need. My need for consistency makes you like, better just like brace for the fact that like this, I'm set up to fail before it even begins. And Jamie said to me, she's like, you know, these things that you're asking for, it seems to me like you would actually be happy if it was like 50 to 70% of the time. But it feels like he doesn't even get to 20% of the time before he just stops. And I think that's true. Like, if I just think that we did the ritual of the marriage moon a week ago, and I don't God, I have a full body like recoil to like wanting to like pull out receipts and being like, these are the days that you did it and these are the days that you forgot, and because it's like, it really isn't about that. Over the course of the last week, have you done these things on a daily basis? No. And yet on the days you've done it, have I felt care? Yeah. And if for the next month you did it even 40% of the days, if you did it, like 3 out of 7 days, like maybe over the course of a month, I would feel a little bit better than I did last month. We've never had that level of consistency. Like, we've never made it longer than a week before we give up on basically just trying to plump up my amygdala to receiving safe, like being receptive to safeness in your presence. My reason for asking for a 3-minute head massage is that it takes 2 minutes to have a neuroplastic event, and that if we want, and by that we mean that your brain is actually literally like changing neural pathways. And if I want to be more receptive to love and care, then I need to be having a positive experience for 2 minutes. I want to be building secure attachment with my partner. I don't have the neural pathways for that. The only way to do it is to build them, and the only way to do it is in your presence. And it's easier for me to receive like safe non-sexual touch than it is kind words. My body like can receive it better, easier. Like, it is a very intentional practice. And I don't know, maybe if 5 out of 7 days a week I was receiving that level of consistent care, and maybe if my amygdala, maybe if the neuroplasticity all does its thing, then maybe when you inevitably do the rupture again, I will be more resourced for it. So we're like conflating two separate things. Like, it's like it's like me getting a head massage. I am not going to go into a like regressed, traumatized state by not receiving a head massage. Like, it's like, if there was ever a thing to like get a 10 out of 10 on, like, that isn't as important. The rupture event, that ask that request that I have of you, like, it, as of right now, like, you can do it 99% of the time, and the 1% that you drop the ball, that's just the reaction. Like, that's just that over the last 10 years, that's what happens. And yeah, like, I recognize your batting average on the one is better than the other. Oof. But like, I want to uncouple those two things. That like, I think you are, what it sounds to me is that like my trauma response at you missing my big request is like projected onto any other request that I have of you. Of like, well, if I don't do this, then Kristyn's going to be pissed off. And like, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit more rage bubbling up too, because I think it's also important to note that before you left yesterday, so that before the rupture happened, we did talk about the ritual of the marriage moon. And I was saying how, because one of your requests was something like a pretty simple, like picking up after myself type of task, right? Like, oh, there's like this one particular thing you do, and if you could just pick up that thing, that would feel great. And I just want to say that I have a really, like, I feel, it doesn't feel good in my body to do that thing. Like, when I do that in the last week, when I've been doing it out of fear. I've been doing it feeling like it's a quid pro quo kind of thing. Like, well, if I do this thing, then maybe I will get, like, that. It's like, it's fucking transactional is maybe what it feels like. And I realized, and when I said to you last night, like, oh, the thing with the Ritual of the Marriage Moon list that you gave me is that I feel like it feels scary. Like I feel this fear that if I fuck up, like it's going to be a big deal. And you're like, oh my God, I know exactly what you mean. And I felt so angry because I wanted to just be like, well, the way you respond, the way you handle your fear is not the way I handle my fear. Like I have a hypervigilance when I'm scared. And I think this is the attachment thing. I'm anxious. So I go for, I reach towards, I overextend myself. And then when you're, I don't know, like I don't want to name your lived experience, but it feels to me that when I make a request of you, you like give yourself much more leeway to getting it right than I give myself. The actions, like the batting average. And so, yeah, I felt very, it felt like you were in this moment that you're like, I know what you mean. Oh yeah, I feel the same way. It's like, no, you don't. Because your relationship to this list is not my relationship to this. I cannot fathom a world where I would be physiologically able to tolerate the discomfort of performing any of your tasks less than 50% of the time. And that's patriarchy to me, to be clear. Like that I like, and so it's just like, oh, like this ritual is flawed because I look at this list and I'm responding in this way, and you're looking at this and your list and you're responding in this different way. And it's funny that like we both say we have the same emotions, but the actual like actions that are accompanied by, that are fueled by those emotions are just like, my fear makes me meet your needs, and your fear is like an avoidance of those needs, is my experience. Shall we take a break?
Feeling pretty activated.
Mm-hmm. You have something you can resource yourself through this activation?
Yeah, I always have my breath. I agree that I skew avoidant. I think that is an accurate assessment of how I respond in my attachment style. How do you feel in this moment?
I'm noticing myself swaying side to side. I'm now standing up. It felt good to share my experience of anger that I felt yesterday before the rupture event. This is like one of those moments where I know that it'd be like, oh, let's tend to Kevin's feelings. Your feelings matter. It's all very important. And we also said last week, the day after the marriage moon, because there was some stuff in the field then as well, that like I can't be the person to be resourcing you. I can't be the person that you're going to resource you through your experience of this next chapter that we're embarking on. So I acknowledge that your feelings matter, and I just want to be so true to myself that right now I metabolized a lot of rage last night after the rupture event. You were not home. That's part of the rupture event, is the fact that you're not home. That's what we'll say. And yeah, was up super late trying to let it out, trying to come down, trying to go to bed. So I like kind of, yeah, I'm oscillating between this like, oh, like, Kevin's in my care. I can help him feel his feelings. And also, like, I can't be the one. Can't be the one to hold you in your big feelings, especially as it pertains to the big feelings you have in being around my feelings, because it's going to be hard for me to hear that and not just be like, well, this is you just being defensive. This is like, your feelings do matter. And I don't necessarily want to be the one to think I'm feeling my avoidance. If you're not ready to continue this conversation.
I'm not saying I don't feel ready, but I'm hearing you say you don't want to receive my feelings, or that, or at least not right now. And so I'm trying to honor that. I'm trying to prioritize your feelings.
I guess I don't know what gaining intimacy here feels like, because I know that what's going to come out is, well, sorry, I don't know what's going to come out. I know that historically at about this point, you go down but I'm not so bad. But if you would only have XYZ, then maybe there's like a certain, I just feel like we're at this hallway of doors, and I just kind of know what all the, I'm like, ugh, I kind of just like know what all these doors are. And I know that there's labor in every single one of those doors. And what does it look like to be like, yeah, I'm open to seeing what's behind these doors. And I guess I can just be like, yeah, no, I'm going to leave now. I don't know.
What are you yearning for right now?
Right now, what I'm yearning for, I still feel really clouded by hurt. I just want ease right now. I'm yearning for ease. It feels, I just want to be a mediocre sitcom dad. I really want that. I know I've asked that before. It would just, oh God, that would be a thing that, like, in this moment, I'm yearning towards that, I think.
And what would that look like?
It's so funny. This is where my head goes. Like, what would that look like? All right, babe, my needs are met. See ya. This felt really good. Bye.
Well, let's give it to you. There's nothing stopping us from you getting that.
Meaning me just walking out right now because
yeah.
And then I also just think, like, but that's just like repeating, like, I wouldn't want to be treated that way. That doesn't feel like dignity. I don't want that to be I don't want that to be a shape.
It doesn't have to be a pattern. I mean,
Yeah.
if it's what you want, believe it
No,
or not,
that's
your
fair.
needs matter to me.
That's fair. I could walk away. Yeah, let's walk away. You can come back.
Lean into ease.
Huh?
You said ease. I said let's lean into ease.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I'm sure we'll be pressing record again at some point. But yeah, I noticed that I've been standing up in this portion of the conversation. I have been able to tolerate looking at you. It did feel good to interrupt you when you were kind of going down a way where I was like, no, I don't want to go down there. And yeah, it feels good that we're stopping. And I'm trusting that you have people and practices that can be resourcing you that are not me. And for that, I'm grateful. So in part 2, I mentioned I mentioned the phrase plumping up my amygdala, which is a phrase that I've definitely heard Carmen talk about. And what I mean when I say that is that it is this concept of that it takes 2 minutes to have a neuroplastic event. And if the event is good, then you're increasing your neural pathways to be able to like linger and receive love and goodness and attachment and connection and all of that. So if there is an insecurity in the field, you can actually gain secure attachment by inducing 2 minutes of this neuroplastic event, plumping up the amygdala. So the third part here is where we actually do a summary of an unrecorded conversation. We ended up having an amazing conversation that honestly, I don't think we would have been able to have if we were in front of microphones. But we summarize it, we talk about it. In this part, Kevin talks about how a song helps connect him with his body in this bottom-up way that we kind of like touch into in part 1. We really talk about how week and a half since the ritual that there's just been so many parts that have broken open, just acknowledging that it is part of what we have called in with the ritual. We talk about discord mode, which comes from Carmen Spagnola talks. I'll have to see if I can find an actual resource where she talks about it, but I've heard her talk about a dream mode, discussion mode, decision mode, and discord mode, where you just are recognizing that we are having a different conversation and that there are different goals in this conversation. And Kevin and I talk a little bit about how a discord mode requires different things based on the differences in where we stand in power, rank, and privilege in patriarchy. And at the end, we call in the archetypal Mediocre Sitcom Dad, which is kind of a little bit of a reference to Kevin Can Fuck Himself with Annie Murphy, about what it would look like to reclaim my agency in pursuing pleasure in a way that feels very unfamiliar. And then, of course, at the very end, there has to be a sourdough update. And so if you are here for the sourdough, look for those timestamps. And the sourdough story is really about practicing making centered offers and making requests of the people that I'm offering my sourdough to, trusting in the capacity of them to be able to make my requests. It's about practicing with this group so that I can practice in my family. I'm uniting with other bakers and offering with the community. I'm reintegrating the love of baking that I had as a kid that I forgot about until very recently. I grapple that sourdough is a food of my culture that I can offer here, and yet on this land, I am a settler and colonizer. And that sourdough is really about practicing community care, the world that I'm reaching towards, and it is also a competent protector, a guide, a teacher, a companion in my own journey of secure attachment. So I am so excited and so proud to share this episode with you. Thank you so much for listening.
All right. Hello and welcome back. It has been several days since we last sat down with mics in hand. We were just trying to figure out, was that five days ago? Okay, so 5 days ago, we were sitting here in the same spot, roughly same everything, and feeling some pretty big feelings. And since then, we've had several conversations that have unfolded over the span of the last 5 days that have not necessarily been, let's go run and grab a microphone and try to like record this.
But we have kind of felt like, oh man, maybe we should have pushed record for that once or twice.
Well, definitely after the fact. And I mean,
after the fact.
Yeah. And I would say, so I guess just to orient ourselves, I believe the day after we pressed record, we had a pretty big conversation that you initiated, that you said, I want to have a conversation. And I believe I said, shall we go out into the and record? And you were like, no, I don't think so. And I mean, there is a part of me that feels like I had wished we had pressed record. And I think that that's a sign that like, I feel proud of that like it's
Yeah.
it's like I just kind of start thinking like if I'm putting it on the podcast, if it's basically like, with the same kind of energy of like a kid wanting to like show their teacher this like cool drawing they did. It's like, hey, like I'm proud of this thing, and I just like I want it to be shared. I want to show it to somebody. And also just reflecting that I believe that we had the conversation that we needed to have, and I believe that we couldn't have had the conversation we needed to have probably if there had been microphones present.
Would
it's
you
funny
agree? As you were talking about the feeling of pride, I feel proud of that conversation too, and I was about to ask you what about the conversation makes you feel prideful, and then I thought about that for myself, and I think often it's the openness, the honesty, the vulnerability, the authenticity of a conversation where it feels more share worthy, that it could be useful to someone, that it's like what the types of conversations that feel hard and scary to share are the ones I feel that way because you don't hear that as often. Like I didn't get exposed to conversations about deep feelings when I was a young lad,
right.
So
right.
But then there's this particular time it would have been too much for me because I knew I was feeling extremely tender and vulnerable, and it's hard enough to just have that one-on-one with you.
Totally. So I guess since you were the one, I up until this point in the podcast, we've heard conversations that I initiated or that I kind of drove, let's say. Since you were the one that initiated, can you just give, I don't know, like can we just do a little replay or review of that little blue conversation?
Yeah, and the quick setup to the pre-story is in the evening of the day after the rupture, I went and played saxophone at open mic night, and then I met up with a friend after at the beach for a couple hours. You had said to me during the day something to the effect of, I trust you have the resources and skills to take care of yourself because like I can't be that person for you right now, or like I'm paraphrasing, but you said something like that. And so reaching out to one of my friends was one of those resourcing things, and we had a chat, and it felt good, but not like super deep or super vulnerable, but like good, felt resourcing, felt more uplifted when I left, came home, showered off and was going to bed, and opened my laptop and opened the homepage of YouTube. And on the homepage was YouTube thought I should watch this performance of Jacob Collier performing his song Little Blue. And I like his stuff, so I clicked it, and I was just going to browse around my computer while I listened to it, but the first little bit grabbed me, and I watched the whole thing, and by the end of it, I was a crying, sobbing mess. Which basically never happens. Yeah. Hard for me to access tears and sadness, real deep sadness or whatever. Yeah. But in that moment, I couldn't even name what the emotion was. It was just a overwhelming. I just broke down crying, and it's a combination of so many things. It's and when the song was over, I pushed replay, and just did it again, and did that like 4 times. And halfway through the song, every time I just like full ugly cry, like full body. And then 20 minutes or whatever go by of that, and I realized I probably will never be able to exit this loop unless I stop playing the song. So
because it just felt so good to cry.
It just felt so necessary.
Okay. Yeah. May I just quick interject? Just
Please.
because I am just now, what's coming to mind is, do you remember when we first met and we were like talking about music we like to listen to, and I was like, oh yeah, and then like I have my crying playlist, like Sufjan Stevens, like Casimir Pulaski Day, Like, and I just remember you being like, why would you want to cry? Like
I have so many
I am
playlists
just like,
and it's
oh my
never
gosh,
occurred.
this is full circle moment. Like you are like, if I don't get off this roller coaster, I'm going to be riding it all night. It just feels so necessary to be crying to this song. Like, I just think that's just cool.
Yeah. And we'll put a link to the video in the show notes because it is beautifully sung and a beautiful arrangement, and it's like it is just a moving piece of art and music.
Can we just slow down and can you tell us like a moment or like what moves you? Like, is there a particular moment that moves you, and is it like the chord changes that like just like pulls on your soul, or is it the lyrics, or like just as best as you can you just like give yourself 1 teaspoon more here? Basically, I want to see if I can get the waterworks going.
Yeah, you know you're pushing the button right now because there is a lyric in the song that it does get me. The whole song, the lyrics are written in such a masterful way where, you know, the listener can make of them what they will. Like, different people can relate to that song for different reasons.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
And so I think it would be the chorus goes, "Don't be afraid of the dark in your heart. You're gonna find a way to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. You're gonna find a way home." Except he sings it with all these runs and scaling 4 octaves.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for whatever reason, I can't even rename now exactly what it is. I think it was just something about like the darkness in your heart, that visual, like, yeah, it felt heavy and dark the day we had after the rupture.
Mm-hmm.
You got me. And I think we've talked recently. I was like talking to my men's group about how, like, you know, you hear pain, no gain,
mm-hmm.
or
capitalism
like,
likes to keep us
you just have to like get through the struggle and then like
right.
and then and that actually maybe just pain and suffering and challenges is just part of the experience that's just always going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it's like you don't have to be afraid of the dark in your heart. Like,
mm-hmm.
something about that clicked.
Mm-hmm.
And
so like it felt you felt compassion, or you felt hope, or you felt like, I guess in looking back, can you like kind of identify if there was any sort of like emotional tone to the tears that you experienced? Was it like,
at the end, then when like I gave myself a moment to breathe, it's like there might be more here, but the thing that I can feel like I can put my finger on is just how much I care. It's like a caring was the sentiment that simmered and sifted to the top.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember when you sat me down for this conversation, and
right.
I was like, okay, why are we not recording this? I was still feeling a lot of charge in like angry apathy, like an angry and apathetic charge, where I was just like, I don't even want to talk to you about stuff unless it's over a microphone. You know, like, it's like, I just, you know, like, I'm so like in this particular season of this moment, I'm feeling so much charge, and yet I saw that you were carrying a different charge, probably a truer like probably deep down my anger was really more just masking some of the, you know, just lots of pain and hurt that is older than you and older than our relationship. And I just remember my anxiety started spiking, because it's just like, oh my gosh, like, you know, what came to me in that moment was, oh, like, he's finally realized that, like, you know, he doesn't want this. He doesn't want to be married. He's going to, you know, like, we're going to just figure out how to, you know, co-parent separate. Like, I mean, that's just, my head always goes there. And even in that moment, you were just like, so the summary of what I'm about to say is, I really love you a lot, and I care a lot about you. Or, you know, that it was just, I think there was, I really love you, and I really care about us, and or really care about you, really love being married to you, or something like that. And I was just like, oh, okay. Like, I don't know what else he's going to say, but just like that little bit was disarming to be like, okay.
I know
right.
you well enough to know that I didn't want to bury the lead, even though the storyteller in me wanted to do some setup, but I was like, let's set some safety into this.
Because I would have just
field.
been so tense that whole time, and then not even able to start receiving anything good.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there is a
attunement.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then you sat me down and.
Yeah. And told you what I basically had said in a voice memo that I had recorded to you at 2:30 a.m. that morning.
Right. We do have audio.
Jacob Collier.
I haven't even heard that one.
And yeah, I told you that I care about you deeply, and that I realize just how important you are to me, how important our family is to me. And that, like, you had said during the day after the rupture, you know, some things, including you wanted to be done with the ritual of the marriage moon.
Yeah.
And then I said, I don't want to be done with it. I don't, it makes me really sad to think that we would give up on that after 1 week. Like, I don't want to give up.
Mm-hmm.
I am not doing the list perfectly, and I acknowledge that, and I feel terrible about that, and I'm sorry for that. And I would much rather us, like, embrace that as that this is part of it. This is part of the ritual. And yeah, I think the fact that I just got so emotionally cracked open by listening to this song before going to bed, it was a signal to me that, like, I think maybe it took that long. Like, it took like 24 hours of, or whatever, however many hours of just you being able to be angry and, like, the heat to, like, dissipate a bit. And then, yeah, I mean, I don't really remember what all else I said in that combo to do more of a play-by-play, but that was what I wanted to convey, that I cared and I didn't want to give up and I want to do what it takes. And okay, I remember at some point then checking in with you and being like, I know I've said a lot of words and I want to see how you're feeling. And you said,
I don't remember.
You said, I feel calm. I feel grounded.
Oh.
I feel pretty at ease.
Oh, and because you were, because of your crying.
I was shook up. My throat was super clenched. It was very hard to talk, kind of trembly.
Mm-hmm.
And you're, like, super at ease and calm. And, you know, for a split second, you know, I think, well, that's messed up.
Mm-hmm.
But actually it's not. It makes perfect sense.
Why does it make perfect sense?
Because vulnerability breeds closeness. And connection. And when you can really see and maybe receive more how much I care, then the knowing that I care, maybe you trust that a little more, you believe that a little more, and then that feels soothing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you your experience now, which feels kind of alarmed.
Well, I had actually forgotten that particular moment of the conversation, but now that you say that, I do remember just being like, oh God, like, it's just like, it is there. I can't explain it, but, like,
if you are allowing yourself to actually feel like really kind of deep emotions that, let's just say, like patriarchy doesn't want you to have access to, like there is like just something so unsettling, or so settling. So like, I was going to say like, I meant but it's like, it's just like, like an unburdening, I guess. I was a combination of unburdening and very settling. It's just like, oh God, like somebody is sharing this. Like, I'm not the only one that is seeing it. I'm not the only one who's feeling it. And yeah, like I think it's part of it is me actually, my nervous system gaining ease with seeing that you can touch those dark places and feel those deep things, and you're not going to leave me. You're not going to hurt me. We also just, over the last couple of days, have identified just some things in my history about why like a male presence can feel actually frightening and scary, and how I do have like just this tendency to want to move to appease like and fawn. And I think I remember in that conversation feeling like this feels really nice having this conversation with Kevin, and also like the anger is still there. The need for being my authentic self and not protecting you. Noticing that I have a pattern in I felt a big feeling, Kevin feels sad about it, and now I'm going to accept his sorry, and we're going to like we're just going to go back to the way things were before. And for me, it was like, okay, I'm feeling heartened. This feels good. And we're going to keep walking down this scary path. Like, we're still returning the ring to Mordor. You know, like, we have a common goal, and it's not really over. Like, yeah, it's there is no going back to any other thing. We're building something new, and in this moment, we're getting a little reprieve. I am open to pressing play on the ritual of the marriage moon, and that I would be willing to receive care from you, in the form of like coming over to give me a hug or something, which I was just absolutely not there for like an entire 24 hours. But like, I'm open to receiving it, but I also can tell you at any time if I don't want you to come closer, or and it's just like reminding myself that it's like, okay, there's an old pattern here that I'm like tempted to step into, but my rage helped me see very clearly that like, just what is my own role in this pattern. And I have told myself a story that you need a lot of protection and a lot of attunement, but it's like, even if you quote unquote benefit from it, like the amount of suffering it causes me to be tracking you that deeply and adjusting myself and pivoting and folding and all the different ways that I have to bend, that it's just like, I don't want that anymore. And I'm not going to do that anymore. And there is a fear of like, what does that mean for you and me and us? I don't know that I have like a thought that I'm totally landing with, but I think I just remember after the fact feeling like a sense of, yeah, it's like a hopefulness. And also there's like a little sense of, and futility is maybe not totally the right, but like non-closure, I guess. Like, it is still open. It's going to keep happening, but like, we're gaining competence in going down to these dark places and like talking our way through it, I guess.
Yeah. So I'm sitting here reflecting on something that's close to the non-closure, and all right, I'm gonna just take this train. I don't know where this train is going. I don't know what station we're stopping at, but it's making me reflect on the pain of the day after, like the challenge and the just, we had a day where there was just like tension. There was just tension in the field every second, whether our kids were in the room or not, or like we're not looking at each other. We're walking in the house and we're like avoiding any non-essential communication,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people out there can relate to having moments like that with their partner where it's just tense and someone's
I will say it to our credit. I feel like we were very, very present for our kids. It wasn't like if anything, we were maybe even like more over the top, like or at least this is my experience, that like I think I was more like, hey guys, and like maybe they won't notice. I mean, maybe they also probably do. Well, and actually, I actually did tell one of our kids that like, you know, like we had a little bit of a disagreement, but we're working on it, and you know, and
it's good to normalize.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with that. But okay, but then they left and for school, and it was tense. Yeah, so there's the whole rupture repair process, right? That like I'm not a master of. I'm just trying to learn what that is. And we've talked before about dream mode, discussion mode, decision mode, which we learned from Carmen, and makes me think of rupture mode. That when some sort of rupture happens and one person is feeling hot, angry, activated, I don't know, I feel like there's room to like build that into our just living model, where it's like when we know the terms of like when we go into discussion mode, we know we don't have the pressure of making a decision in this conversation. We literally are just trying to kind of brainstorm and think through the possible options. And there's no expectation that we're going to reach a conclusion at the end of this. And so then we know the implication is that there's just like this relief of pressure. So like when rupture mode happens, I'm not necessarily trying to figure out all the bullet points right now, but there's something about accepting the hardness of it, accepting that it's going to take a while. Like, we're not going to fix this right away. We're in rupture mode. Someone's angry. We need to wait. We need to give space, or like, you know, because it's like when I don't have the answers, but I'd feel like there's something there of, like you were saying with the non-closure, that it's so easy for me as a white guy that grew up in America to go into problem solving. And when a rupture happens and there's anger, that is the worst mode to be in. You know, it's like, it's not about that. It's not about fixing the thing. It's not about apologizing, like even like that, you know, I don't know. We need time. And like, that's what we did in a way where like you led the way of that day, and like of when you were feeling. Remember, in the first third of this recording, you couldn't even look at me. I didn't even say a word. The second third of the recording, you could look at me more. And so I don't know. Is anything that I'm saying resonating with you about rupture mode?
I mean, yeah, and I think like the rule for, and it's Discord mode, I believe. I believe there's a secret fourth one, and it is for discourse, or for this level
to keep the D
disruption
going.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but rupture mode works. I think it really is to try to like depersonalize the feedback that you might be receiving.
Yes.
In that moment. Like, I think that's where the self-attune or the self-regulation comes in, and just being like, okay, like how can I be resourced outside of this person? And then I also think that just in order for there to be any sort of actual healthy resolution in Discord mode, there needs to be a very clear like understanding of the power dynamics within that conflict. That like, not only are you a man in the patriarchy and I'm a woman, and we are gendered, you know, expectations and conditioned along those lines. In addition, like, we have so many traumas that I can point to in my life that have certain manifestations, and we know this, and you don't in the same way, whether that, you know, like we don't have quite the language around that. And I would say that could potentially be putting me in this, like, I'm hesitating saying that it's putting me in a down power position because of what happened, but it means that I can like go to a place that it is like biologically impossible to get myself out of sometimes, in a way that
it seems happens more often to me than it does to, like, I lose myself sometimes.
Definitely trauma material is a factor, and power,
Right.
rank, and privilege are a factor. And I think tracking the charge of the moment, whatever is happening somatically,
Right.
for either person, if there's anger somewhere or whatever.
Well, and what's so common, I think, and I'll speak for the role that I play in this history, where like I might come and bring a charge, but then in my charge, I upset you, and then that brings a charge about in you, and then I immediately need to appease. So then it's that classic, like,
You immediately need to peace out. Is that what you're going to say?
appease you, like and be like, oh, actually, I'm so sorry. So it's like, I'm the one coming in hot, being like, something's wrong. I don't like this, or I need this thing changed. But maybe my like delivery isn't very good, or you don't have the experience of depersonalizing that feedback and realizing it actually has nothing to do with you, and then you're not maybe like going into that like defensive, like fighting mode, not violent, but like just like I'm going to like defend myself, like I'm not gonna take this lying down. And like that, it actually, like, it feels really liberating to be able to like not protect you from my feelings when they're big.
Yeah.
For me to not be needing to like caretake you through my big feelings. And that, like you said, we can take a lot of time because it really was like, okay, and now I need some space again, and I need to just go sit by myself for a couple hours before I can even like be in the same room as you again.
Yeah. I think the time thing is probably just the big thing that feels perspective changing or something.
Mm-hmm.
Just recognizing how big the charge is of any given rupture or discord, and like some sort of proportionally relevant amount of time allocated to the dissipating of that, and to lower the expectations that it's like we are just going to have to be with pain and tension for like a day today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just going to be how it is. And then you can just like embrace it easier or something.
Right.
Because in that way, then I feel like without trying to like force the issue, and like it can just make it worse, and it spiral, and then one day turns into like a week, turns into a month of like just ongoing tension that you have. And that's one thing I'm really proud of us that we do is we're working on shortening the loops.
Yeah.
That
got a lot of old tension that's coming out, though. I'm telling you that. I feel like it was kind of like a vomiting of old shit.
Head on,
And to the best of our capability at this point, anyway. Yeah.
Well, that's all we ever can do.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a lot more than we used to be able to do. That's for sure. I think another part of this that I really like is the conversation. I'm going to pivot just slightly, where I just said that, like, I need the wide berth or the spaciousness and of a mediocre sitcom dad. And do you remember the show with Annie Murphy, that it was like Kevin Can Fuck Himself, where it was like he's pretend like it's like a sitcom whenever the husband's in the room, but then like whenever the husband's not in the room, it's like Breaking Bad, and you realize like just like that she's like trapped in this like totally like bad marriage, and
it's like a dark world.
It's this like dark drama, and then it's like split, and then there's like also this comedy, and
the comedy side is like a super stereotypical
sitcom. Home Improvement era, like but like the name of the comedy would be like Man Baby or something, because he literally like is like an absolute toddler in a lot of ways. But
what about that show?
Because like that's just the show that always comes to mind when I think of a mediocre sitcom dad, even though they don't have kids, but just like the level of freedom that he gets to move about the world, and that his light is so well lit, and his like he actually gets to live in this world that like she just like only gets to be this like a side character that just always gets shat on. And anyway, but then I've been thinking a lot about this show, and I actually do think it kind of relates to Severance in just the way that it's like there is like an underworld, like there is like a down below, and it's like which one is the down below, which one is the real world, which one, and I just thinking about what it would actually take for me to like Freaky Friday with Kevin Can Fuck Himself. Whatever, his name is obviously Kevin, but the guy from Kevin Can Fuck Himself. It's like I am so like it would be impossible for me to do the ridiculous things that he does on that show. But it's like if in any given moment I think to myself, what would Kevin Can Fuck Himself do in this moment? And it's like I would just like. I'm kind of feeling tired and I want to go sit down. Like maybe I will go sit down because he is just like he is a child in like the most wonderful sense of that word, which is I'm only thinking of myself and like my own joy and delight. And there's like something nice about being around somebody who's in tune with their delight and their joy and their pleasure is one of the words of this season. And like, he's obviously he's a problematic character and it would be impossible for me to totally be him. But there's like something just wildly liberating about like, okay, in this moment, can I do this thing? And can I trust that like you can tolerate it?
And the funny thing is, I 100% support that. I think that is the right prescription or idea for you, like in a lot of situations like that is right. That's what I want too.
Well, and I think
give yourself the opportunity to feel more ease, to feel more pleasure, to not feel as much pressure to whatever it is.
Well, right, because like we were talking about, I think one of the problems like that really got exacerbated, which is good because now it's like, oh my God, like this was a problem, this was a pattern, and the Ritual of the Marriage Moon helped me to see that, where it's just like there is this thing that happens that you respond to my requests differently than I respond to your requests. That I see a list of your requests and I almost begin feeling like an immense amount of anxiety. Like, and anytime I'm seeing that request could be met, it's like, ooh, now this is like an opportunity to fuck up. And oh my God, I better like, and it's like, I have to do the thing. And if I ever forget to do the thing, then it's just like, oh shit, I fucked up. And I guess I can't speak for your experience, but it just feels to me like you're able to embody the, I am trusting that if she has the capacity to do it, she'll do it. And if she's not, it's because she doesn't have, I can let it go.
That is how I feel.
And it's like,
and with the things on my list, I more am like, okay, here are the ones I know I can do right now. And then I'm going to hopefully get to these ones or do these ones as good as I can while I make sure I knock some of these out. I just like.
I guess what I mean to say is like, it felt to me like you're more realistic in your expectations of, well, sometimes I'm going to be able to get these and sometimes I won't, but like Kristyn will understand that like if I can't, I can't. And it's like I feel like the weight of your list is like so much greater than like that there's like more at stake with the things on your list and me fucking up than like you're necessarily that it's not that I need you to be, I don't need you to be like hunched over and anxious and in a trauma response about like fucking up the things on my list, but that like the invitation is I can be a little more like Kevin Can Fuck Himself and like I'm actually allowed to forget and that I actually can. And I told you this point, I was like, I might even purposefully not do those things because I might need to actually practice letting my body be okay with the fact that like, be like, you know what, you're feeling a little freaked out about doing this thing. It feels like it might be building resentment. It feels like it's like you're not doing this from a place of love. Like you're doing this from a place of like of I don't know, like obligation and anxiety and worry and ultimatums or something. And you said like, well, yeah, like it obviously isn't in your capacity if that's how you're thinking about it. And it was like, but I physically could do it. Like the point is like I would always overpower my own body being like, oh God, I better do this thing. And then like do the thing. And then just be like, oh God, I have to keep slogging away at this. Then to just be like, oh wow, like I'm not his servant. And like, if he's going to like, I'm, you know, in this moment, I'm not going to do this thing. And I think that was just a really important thing for me to say out loud. And just because like that is 100% what a mediocre sitcom dad would do. Is like, oh, and just make a list. Oh, I lost the list. Oh, no. And it's like,
I like mediocre shitcom.
mediocre shitcom dad. Yeah, that's true.
I love that piece of what our ritual has become, that it's like it's definitely not about doing the list perfectly. It's about being mindful as we go through trying to do the list and receiving the list and all of that, and seeing what effect it has on us.
Mm-hmm.
And then confronting that and using all the tools that we can muster in those moments. And so, yeah, if it means for you, what feels more important is to mindfully not do the list, because that's the feeling that we're trying to cultivate, is like empowerment and release from anxiety and external pressure and stuff, then by all means.
We sat down to record because we were having a conversation about my sourdough. So I guess we can pivot to that, which I'll actually segue a little bit, because I don't even think I've said these words to you, because I've also been reflecting on this. So I totally forget at this point what I've actually said into the microphone. I've either talked about this like 17 times or never. But about the sourdough swap that I have with, fellow parents at my kids' school and neighbors in my community, where I'm making a shit ton of sourdough every week and just putting it out there for people to take. And this group is created because I explicitly say that I want to be, practicing anti-capitalism and putting myself out there, of like just asking myself, what can I offer with ease and joy and not feel resentment, I'm not going to overextend myself with any of my offers. And likewise, I might be making requests of people, and and that it's just like a place where we can practice asking for what we need and receiving care from one another. And it's funny because a couple weeks ago I reached out to everybody and I said, I need you guys to do this one thing when it comes to arranging your pickups of your sourdough. Like, I don't want to just be by my phone all day. I don't want to just let me know the day before, like, how you're going to pick up your bread. And does everybody do it 100% of the time? No. And I just recently was like, I don't feel resentment about it because I have now made the request. Like, they do all know my preference. And the thing is like, when they do mess up, they'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, the time got it. Like, they recognize that, like, oh yeah, I kind of goofed. I'm sorry. The day got away from me, or, whatever their reasons are. And it's like, I can still feel like, sure, annoyed or whatever. If like somebody doesn't do a thing that I've asked them to do, I get to be annoyed. I'm allowed to be annoyed. And like, there is some freedom in just like, but they're not doing it to annoy me. Obviously they're not, like, obviously, like, these people are not, like, I love and admire everybody that I'm in this group with. So like, they're just doing the best they can. And then it's like, oh my God, if I can practice this with these people, how much better can I get about like the ritual of the marriage moon? It's going to be a lot easier for me to practice with people that I don't have just years of built up relational gunk and, misfirings and bad practices. And, it's easier with like people that I don't know, as well, or, just don't have quite the history with. I'm like trying to build community with. And it's like, okay, like I can practice like not being offended. I can practice, you know, like, which it sounds silly, like saying it out loud, but it really is like this realization of I've made the request and they are doing it to the best of their ability. And then again, just really like tuning into myself, like just every time I'm about to make an offer to do a thing, like, okay, does this feel good? Or like, maybe I'll do it a little bit differently, or I don't know. It's been a really cool practice of like navigating this, like, what does it take for each of us in order to get the things that we are working towards.
And so you've been feeling particularly buzzy today because there was a big sourdough day.
Yes.
Today.
Big
well,
one.
It started yesterday as far as dough making.
Yeah. Yeah. We did our very first. So in the sourdough swap, we now have a couple other bakers, and our kids all go to the same community school. And having been a former teacher and just like a nice thing to do for some people in my community, we were just like, what would it look like for us to just bake as much as we possibly can over the course of the next, like 48 hours and bring it to the kids' school. And we got together and we made it happen. We got like over 10 loaves of bread and 40 bagels, 40 English muffins, 100 cookies. And then we were like dispersing them all on platters with different jam, and other people from the group were also contributing, different like dips and jams and pestos and things like that. And it was just so cool to actually do this thing that we'd been envisioning, not for like a really long time, but for a couple months, couple weeks, something like that. Like we were kind of like, oh, this would be a fun thing to do. Oh, well, one of these days, we kind of kicked the can down the road a little bit. And then it was like, okay, like let's do it. And we did it. And yeah, it just feels really cool to be sharing sourdough and even like larger, more like even like more generous, more exposed, I guess, like, just by which I mean like, more like lots of mouths ate my sourdough today. We're all like cooking from the same sourdough like culture too. So it's like everybody's sourdough comes from the same culture. Like, I don't know, like there's just something really like unifying about that. The summer before we moved, I was going through a bunch of old stuff, and I remember I wrote a letter about like all the things I was going to miss about all the things that I was going to miss about my dad. I wrote this letter shortly after he died, and one of the things I said in my letter was like, I'm going to miss all my baking, and that he always loved my baking and everything I made. He always my official taste tester. And I was just like, oh, I had like totally forgotten that I liked baking as a kid. Once I was like, I do remember making chocolate chip cookies as a kid, and that I was like a thing I could do myself, when I was like 10 or 11. And so, yeah, it does feel like I kind of lost my train of thought, but that it's like I'm returning to this thing that I really enjoy doing.
I said making it your culture.
Making it my culture, yeah. And that sourdough is actually a big part of my culture. Like if I think of where my people came from, like those are wheat people. they would be making sourdough a bunch, and it just made me think of, it's so hard to find here. It's like, okay, like what does it look like to honor that this is a thing that I can share and a thing that I can bring and I can offer, and then also hold the question too of like, my identity as a colonizer, and where does I continue to grapple with like the gentrification or whatever in food, but
well,
yeah,
you're doing the best you can
yeah.
with the world that we live in, and maybe in an attempt to kind of bring us home, bring it full circle. This morning there were some other ladies in our kitchen with all this bread, getting it all prepared, slicing machines, and oh man, the smell of fermented wheat was thick in the air in our kitchen, and then you went and delivered it and brought a bunch of smiles to a bunch of the workers' faces at our kids' school, and came home and you still had this buzzy energy, right? You said you're feeling excited, you had adrenaline, and right before we came in here to record this, we took a moment to savor the excitement. And one of the things that we were talking about, going back to our discussion of the ritual of the marriage moon, and, you know, things that bring up your trauma triggers or things that bring big activation or whatever, that one of the things we can do in practice day to day is, you know, having nutritious contact and taking moments to have a neuroplastic event with positive things like joy and excitement, and really trying to program those into the nervous system. And so, yeah, it's moments like that where, you know, I feel good. I feel good about us, about the work that we're doing, gives me hope. It makes me feel hopeful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when you are feeling that spontaneous, subconscious excitement like you were today, brought to you by sourdough.
Well, yeah, I'm working together in my
good.
community to help the larger, you know, like there's just so much about like who I am and how I want to be in this world, and you know, and who I was, like, yeah, as a former teacher, like that would have totally made my day, like to just have a big platter of sourdough shit, and all, like, are you kidding me? Like, who wouldn't love that? And so yeah, it did feel really good, and to be building community around that too, and just like excited of like what's it going to look like in 6 more months, another year, 2 years, you know, like, or, you know, or will I be shifting from there and doing something else or whatever.
And it makes me think one more thing too, kind of going back to the story that I had about the little blue laying in bed, and your buzzy excitement right now with the sourdough, and a conversation that we had. I don't remember if it was from our working with our therapist or wherever, but just the model of thinking about top-down processing versus bottom-up processing, and how most of us often think with our minds first, and
or we do anyway,
like have our thoughts going and analyzing, and then like that trickles down into how the body feels. But if you flip it and tune into what's happening in your body, you can let that inform the mind and have that be the primary. But I don't have nearly as much practice or training at that. And so when I was in that moment in the bed by myself and eventually gave myself a break, the thought was, what is my body trying to tell me here? Like, I don't even know why I'm crying. So it was like, but like, okay, my body is doing this. It's not my mind. Like, I don't even know. I'm not thinking a thought that's making me, it's just coming out, you know? So what is my body trying to tell me here? And it was just how deeply I care about you. But whether it was that or the excitement and fizz from the sourdough, it's like, what is your body trying to tell you here? You know, and I just love that. I love the
I must really care about this. This
Yeah.
must be really important. I feel very proud. This feels significant. This feels meaningful. I feel like I'm on the right track. Like I'm still tracking that there's like so much shit happening in the world right now, and
what
I'm actually not like paralyzed by my grief on that. Like I'm actually mobilizing towards something that I really care about.
And what it takes for you to access that feeling is bake some bread for some other people. Yeah,
and be with like, and building community of people that are wanting to do that. You know, like that just feels like a really good a really good practice space for all the ways I want to be in the world. Yeah.
Just cool to know. It feels like a life hack to know the things that make you feel good. And then like when you need to pick me up, you can just go do them. And like, that's going to make me feel like adrenaline filled excitement.
I mean, honestly, so I don't remember if I've said this, but I feel like when you think of the building blocks of secure attachment being contact nutrition,
Like sourdough can actually do a lot of those things. It's like sourdough is like a shared rhythm. Like I'm doing the same thing every night, every morning, it is ingestion behaviors. I am eating the thing that I am making. There is safe touch. Like there is a different way that the dough feels at the beginning and at the end. And I mean, I guess I don't necessarily have vocal prosody, although sometimes it does crackle when it comes out of the oven. So that feels like it's like chirping at me. And it's not a mammal, so it doesn't have eyes, but I sure love beholding it. It always, like, it really, I interocept myself doing sourdough, like it always feels good, to the point where I sometimes don't realize just how many minutes it takes for certain things, because it's like it doesn't feel like it's like there's a timelessness that happens. It's like it's an embodied practice. It's just like I can lose time. I can be in the kitchen for hours and not really even feel like I've been working until I'm like, oh wow, I think I need to sit down. I mean, that's how I know I love it,
If you scored the dough a certain way, it would have eyes.
It would have eyes. That's true. I think it was important for me that we offer a little bit of closure before we do any sort of publishing of this episode. And it's my hope that any listener that may have been feeling a particular charge or walking away with big beliefs or accusations towards Kevin or myself from the earlier parts of this episode can see that we are just offering our conversation as, I don't know, just some proof that marriage is hard and takes a certain level of work, and that we can take new shapes within long-term relationships, and it's like messy and hard, but it is possible. I don't know. What do you want to say?
Discord mode. You just need to go into Discord mode sometimes. It doesn't mean that we're failing. It doesn't mean the world is imploding or that our relationship is going to end. That Discord mode is just part of the experience. And the more familiar we get with Discord mode, shorter it's going to be. I don't know. That's my hope. I don't even know if it works that way. I just know that it's part of it. And I'm here to just embrace it as part of the thing. It's
like we grow in Discord mode, I would say.
Right.
I think that, like, that's, it's like
a guy from my men's group, when I was kind of talking about this, he reflected that he felt jealous that I have the opportunity to work on a relationship because he was in a relationship and is no longer, and misses it. And so it's like, yeah, I have the opportunity to be in Discord mode and work and grow. Wow.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
I'm pretty happy about that too.
All right. I think that's it for now. I'm open to, I do think that, I think I kind of said this a little bit earlier in the severance. I think the fact that this really happened within the first week of me kicking off season 2, and just knowing what the astrology of this upcoming couple months is going to be, I anticipate we could be sitting by a microphone again at some point, just tracking all the things that
you're inviting it in.
I mean,
you're inviting in the energy.
I'm not specifically saying that I need more of what we just experienced, but I think I'm not turning away from it. We haven't officially undone the marriage moon or anything. And so I guess I think it's okay to be maybe this is just the first chapter in this particular book.
At a minimum, next full moon around there, we'll have to check in on month 1.
That's probably true. Yep, that's true. All right. Thanks so much for listening. Take care of yourself, and I hope that you are finding moments of joy, pleasure, ease, and satisfaction in wild defiance to the absurdity of imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. And before I sign off, I would like to
leave you with a quote from another one of my teachers, Rev Angel Kyoto Williams. Says, "Love and justice are not two. Without inner change, there can be no outer change. And without collective change, no change matters."